first and foremost, welcome each and every one of you, and thank you for finding the time to join us today. What we have here is a unique event, and obviously, as the flyer and the advertisement went out, the title, "A Domination System Veiled Within a Native Supreme Court Victory."
I wanted to, as I say, set the context, and the way that I do that is by acknowledging the original free and independent existence of our nations and peoples, the original nations and peoples of what some people call Great Turtle Island, referring to the continent of what is now called North America, but the original nations and peoples of the entire Western Hemisphere and all others throughout the world. And that original free and independent existence, extending back to the beginning of time, is to be contrasted with the systems of domination and dehumanization that were brought over here into other parts of the planet by what were then called the monarchies of Christendom, by the various kingdoms or empires or political constructs that were existing in that time.
First of all, I want to just pick up the thread that Steve laid down, which is the view from the shore. When we start looking at law and politics, one of the things that's most common in people who are struggling to deal with law or to deal with politics is that their minds are already engulfed by the standard narratives, so that they're it's like trying to fight your way out of something and not finding your way to move out. And if you're standing outside that idea world, that dominant idea world, suddenly you have a perspective that's free from the kind of strictures that are imposed on you when you're trying to think inside the existing law and inside the existing politics. So in the McGirt case, which is going to be our primary focus today, is going to give us an entry point. Why are we talking about today, and what is it that when we talk about the veiled domination? The veiled domination is the issue of Christian discovery, which is lurking in the case. It's almost on the surface at one point, and it's deeply buried in another point. And it's also, the doctrine of Christian domination is the idea, the concept, the doctrine that both the majority and the dissent share. And this is what is the hidden element in McGirt. Just to go all the way back to the beginning in the US law, the doctrine of Christian discovery, as Steve will explain, goes back 500 or more years. But in US law, it goes back to 1823. And it's where John Marshall and the Supreme Court of the US adopted the doctrine of Christian discovery. And he talks about the principle of the right of discovery, then unknown to all Christian people. That is, a Christian monarch could send out a ship, and they would so-called discover something, and they would claim ownership, the right to take possession, notwithstanding the occupancy of the natives who were heathens. Now, if there's anybody that tries to tell you that this is just another aspect of critical race theory or race law, it's not necessary to go further than this to see the religious basis of the doctrine of Christian discovery. These were Christians against heathens.
The other part of it is that the dissenting opinion written by Justice Roberts and another opinion by Justice Thomas are very unabashedly admitting to a process of genocide. Now, they probably don't see it as a process of genocide, but genocide is, of course, the intent to destroy in whole or in part an entire nation or people or nation of people. The English language is such a maze. You know, the word amazing, it has to do with wandering through a maze. And if you think of our ancestors having looked out at those initial ships coming in, or the people that came ashore when they first did so, with their intentions to take over and establish their control over everyone and everything, that our ancestors had no understanding whatsoever of that language that was being spoken by the invaders. And so then the question becomes, if we understand the sophistication of those intellectuals, of the people that wrote those documents such as papal bulls or royal charters, any of those types of documents, the prerogatives to Columbus and so forth, that was the highest type of development of language within those cultures, within those societies. And of course, that was not what the average person understood. It was what in a very elite small group of people understood in terms of the expertise that they had to put those kinds of ideas on paper. We now have the benefit of something that our ancestors did not have, which is the opportunity to go through those old documents and through the historical record and to uncover all of the types of information that has been covered up, as it were, and hidden.
And imagine that you were saying, well, how come that can continue to exist? What we're asking is the same question. How can this doctrine of Christian discovery, tied at its roots with doctrines of slavery, how can this doctrine continue to exist? The irony is that in 1954, separate but equal was overturned by the Supreme Court, and in 1955, the doctrine of Christian discovery was explicitly argued by the Justice Department and approved by the U.S. Supreme Court in a case involving the Tehitam Band of Tlingit Indians. So we're talking live issues in today's terms, or any other case for that matter, can only be understood in context of the whole structure of the field of law, in this case, federal Indian law. A proper understanding of federal Indian law requires, from what we're saying, the view from the outside, the view from the shore. Get a sense of it as a whole. Don't get caught inside the maze that it is. And then to understand that once you look at it from that perspective, you see that it is rooted, federal Indian law is rooted in the doctrine of Christian discovery, which remains an active doctrine in federal Indian law to this day. That is, cases that seem to be winning, that are affirming the power of the U.S., actually are even more deleterious because they do not really acknowledge the continuing possible arguments that can be used by the parties in these very cases to undermine the decision that was just reached. So bottom line, McGirt did not change the foundation and structure of federal Indian law. In my opinion, it does not deserve to be called the most important case of the 21st century, as many commentators, New York Times, Rachel Maddow, other kinds of big people are saying, oh, such an important decision. If they had understood anything about it, scraped barely below the surface, they would have understood that's not really what this case is all about.
And so to all the different nations throughout the hemisphere, and you'll find that each and every one of us had and have our traditional laws and systems. And so we are working with that legacy, but the unfortunate thing is the extent to which so much of that has been destroyed or damaged. When you look at that tremendous body of information, the knowledge and wisdom evolved over countless generations that worked with ecosystems instead of destroying them, worked with species instead of destroying them, worked with waters instead of poisoning them, and worked in reciprocity with all the different forms of life and a prayerful relationship with all the forms of life. That's a very, very important set of models that can be drawn upon and turned to in this time of confusion and chaos.
It's not an easy thing for someone to receive a presentation like this who maybe have never heard of any of this stuff, and to not emotionally react to the substantial and very detrimental ideas and concepts that have materialized into a significant amount of dehumanization on behalf of Native people. So something I've always been very mindful of is that not only in the question of what you do about it, but obviously I would never be a proponent to state that you want to do something negative about it. Obviously, you want to begin to engage in a thought process and develop solutions into the future, and then coming to the collective awareness through the exercise of becoming individually aware of this kind of information, start developing a more collective awareness with like-minded individuals, refine our thought process about what you do about it, and hopefully develop some communications that lead under the principle and our foundation of integrity, which I think is key when you're dealing with this kind of issue. Because if you don't have that as your principle, your foundation, you run the risk to invoke thoughts and our thought patterns that develop into actions that can have substantial damage and or collateral damage to entities, individuals, peoples, and oftentimes those people may be very innocent in all this and not aware with regard to some of the building blocks that are formulating our cognitive awareness, our identity, our understanding of that which we deem to be our practical reality.